So here's the first on a number of videos on the astrology of sex and sexuality and what makes two people physically and sexually attracted to each other using astrological language. And I'm going to start this by just looking at the basics. I'm not looking at emotional compatibility, mental stimulus, or two people individually being compatible, because that's ruled by things like the sun and the moon and Mercury. I'm looking at Venus and Mars. And whenever I deal with sexuality issues, when I do synastry charts and composite charts, synastry is comparing two people's charts against the other, then particularly here, I'm looking at Venus and Mars stuff. And it's what I used to be delicate around and be sensitive and only hint and refer to, and now I just simply call the boy-girl stuff. And it's clear when dealing with individual couples whether the boy-girl stuff really works or not, clearly dependent, or at least heavily influenced by the individual aspects made from one person's Venus and Mars to the other person's, and particularly the signs of the zodiac that Venus and Mars are in. Now, if, regardless of your sun and moon sign, and regardless of what sign is on the descendant, when it comes to physical compatibility, it really does help if Venus and Mars in one person's chart are in signs that are friendly and compatible to another person's chart. For example, if one person's got, say, Mars in Gemini and Venus in Leo, then with Venus in Leo, they're going to be quite flamboyant and out there. And with Mars in Gemini, they're also going to be very social and intellectual and mentally stimulated. But if they're partnered with someone with, for example, Mars in Pisces and Venus in Capricorn, then that Venus in Capricorn is going to be much more demure, staid, shy, and dignified, as opposed to Venus in Leo, which is much more outgoing and doesn't care about image. And Mars in Pisces, water sign, is much more emotive, feelingful, sensitive than Mars in Gemini, which is much more intellectual and mental. So these two combinations really don't work. Whereas if you have one person with Mars in Libra and another person with Mars in Aquarius, then you've got two air signs, and both of these people will be people who are really good physically but who talk a lot in bed. Similarly, if you have someone with Venus in, one person with Venus in Taurus and another person with Venus in Virgo, then the Earth combination will create quite a fertile and physical side to the relationship that's accompanied by more physicality rather than words and talking. But with Virgo and Taurus, there's going to be a bit of food involved as well. Aspects from Venus and Mars to the other planets, particularly the outer planets, do affect the subtleties of sexual taste and expression. And I'll come to that perhaps another time. But when looking at Venus and Mars, especially if one person's Venus aspects another person's Mars, and it doesn't really matter what aspect it is, it doesn't matter if it's trine, sextile, conjunct, or square and opposition, then there is going to be a magnetic physical attraction. If two people's Marses are square or opposite, there can be mutual antipathy and an instant, almost physical rejection of each other. If two people's Venuses are opposite or square to each other, then it can be that there's a sense of mutual overindulgence or gluttony and daring each other to be the first one to quit. It is when one person's Venus and another person's Mars affect each other, regardless of angle, that the sexual stimulus, the dynamism in the interaction becomes potent. So, if you're in a good relationship, you'll probably find that your Venus and Mars and your partner's Venus and Mars are quite compatible. More on this one later.